Fairy tales. They have been a part of our lives for centuries, passed down from generation to generation. They make us think of magical places, brave heroes, and happy endings. We imagine castles, enchanted forests, and mythical creatures. But German fairy tales are different. They take us to a world where shadows lurk and secrets are hidden in every corner. They're much darker and scarier. The forests are not just enchanted, they are ominous and filled with unknown dangers. These stories, called Märchen, are not for the easily scared. They are tales of caution, filled with grim lessons. They're full of creepy forests, mean stepmothers, and scary things. The villains are more sinister and the dangers more real. Why are German fairy tales so gruesome? What makes them stand out from the rest? It's not because Germans like dark stories. It's a reflection of their historical context. It's because of their history, culture, and the times they lived in. And what was going on in people's minds back then? Life was tough, and these stories mirrored that reality. These stories weren't just for fun. They were a way to teach important lessons. They taught kids about the dangers of the world, about the consequences of their actions, back when life was much harder. These tales were a survival guide, wrapped in the guise of a story. Germany has had a lot of hard times, like famines, plagues, wars, and lots of changes. These events shaped the lives of the people, leaving a lasting impact on their culture and traditions. The harsh realities of daily life were reflected in the stories they told, which were often filled with themes of struggle and survival. These tough times showed up in their stories. Fairy tales were not just for entertainment. They were a way to pass down lessons and warnings from one generation to the next. The tales were filled with metaphors and symbols that represented the real dangers and hardships people faced. Fairy tales helped people deal with their worries and taught kids about dangers. They served as a coping mechanism, allowing people to process their fears and anxieties in a way that was accessible and understandable, especially for children. Think about how poor people were and how often they went hungry. Poverty was widespread, and many families struggled to make ends meet. The stories often depicted characters who were poor and hungry, reflecting the reality of many people's lives. Sometimes parents had to leave their kids alone, like in Hansel and Gretel. This wasn't just a story. It was a reflection of the desperate measures some families had to take when they couldn't provide for their children. That really happened when there wasn't enough food. Starvation was a real threat, and families often had to make heartbreaking decisions to survive. The forest, a scary place in many stories, was a real danger too. It was a place where people could easily get lost, and it was filled with threats that were both natural and human-made. Wild animals and bad people lived there. The forest was often depicted as a place of mystery and danger, where one could encounter wild beasts or bandits. These stories, even though they are made up, were based on real fears. They captured the essence of the anxieties that people felt in their everyday lives, making the tales resonate deeply with their audiences. They reminded people that life was hard and that bad things could happen to anyone. These stories served as a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the ever-present possibility of misfortune, teaching valuable lessons about resilience and caution. Hansel and Gretel is a famous German fairy tale that has been told for generations. It's about being left alone in a dark, foreboding forest, starving, and even facing the terrifying prospect of cannibalism. The kids meet a witch who is very evil, living in a house made of candy to lure them in. They have to be very clever and resourceful to escape her clutches and find their way back home. Snow White is another classic example of a fairy tale with dark undertones. It shows how jealousy can consume a person, and it also reflects the hardships women faced in historical contexts. The evil queen wants to be the most beautiful and powerful, so she tries to kill Snow White out of envy and spite. Snow White is kind and innocent, embodying purity and goodness, but that makes the queen hate her even more. These stories are scary, filled with eerie imagery and dark themes, but they teach us valuable lessons about human nature. They show us that bad things can hide even in people who seem normal, reminding us to be cautious. Sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones we know, hiding their true intentions behind familiar faces. Section 4. From Grim Origins to Disney-fied Delights. Over time, German fairy tales have been changed, especially in movies. Disney made them much less scary and violent. Some people don't like that the dark parts are gone, but it's because things have changed. Kids today don't see the same scary things as kids in the past. Now the stories are about hope, bravery, and good winning over evil. But even with the changes, the original stories are still there, underneath. The dark parts make them interesting and exciting even today. Section 5. The enduring allure of darkness. German fairy tales are still popular, even though they've been changed. That's because scary stories can be important. They teach us things and help us think about our fears. They remind us that the world isn't always safe and that being brave is important. Even though they're scary, these stories give us hope and show us that even when things are bad, we can still be strong.